The night sky over the small town was heavy with storm clouds, and the wind carried with it a strange, electric tension. Inside St. Mercy's Hospital, a young girl named Emily sat trembling on the edge of her bed, her tiny fingers clinging to the blanket as if it could protect her from the nightmare waiting just outside. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her lips split, and her arms covered in bruises that told stories no child should ever have to tell. She was only 12 years old, but her life had already been marked by more pain than most could imagine. Her stepfather, a man whose heart had long gone cold, was on his way to take her home. The police couldn't hold him, no solid evidence, they said. No witnesses. But Emily knew the truth. She had lived it. And tonight, she prayed to anyone who would listen that someone, anyone, would stop him. If you believe that kindness still exists in this world, if you believe that even the darkest nights can be broken by the light of compassion, then take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Because what happened next would prove that sometimes, angels ride on two wheels. Outside, the hum of engines grew louder, a low, thunderous growl that echoed through the parking lot. Nurses peeked through the windows, their faces pale, unsure whether they were witnessing the beginning of a riot or something else entirely. One by one, headlights cut through the rain, and leather jackets bearing the emblem Steel Wolves MC gleamed under the hospital lights. 97 bikers, men with weathered faces, tattooed arms, and hearts that had seen too much, rode in together, their engines roaring like a promise. They weren't there for violence. They were there for Emily. It had started hours earlier, when a nurse named Linda, shaken by Emily's tears, had made a desperate phone call to an old friend, Jack "Ironhand" Malone, the leader of the Steel Wolves Motorcycle Club. Jack wasn't a man easily moved by words, but something in Linda's trembling voice broke through the armor he'd built over the years. He remembered his own daughter, lost in an accident years ago, and the ache that never truly healed. Without hesitation, he called his brothers. "We ride tonight," he told them. "There's a little girl who needs us." By the time the stepfather's car rolled into the hospital parking lot, the bikers had already formed a silent wall at the entrance. Rainwater dripped from their jackets as they stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes hard, jaws set. The stepfather sneered, thinking he could intimidate them. But as he stepped out of his car and saw nearly 100 bikers staring him down, something in his confidence cracked. Inside the hospital, Emily heard the distant rumble and froze. She thought it was thunder at first, but when the sound didn't fade, she went to the window. Her breath caught. Rows of motorcycles glistened under the streetlights, and among the men standing there, she saw one with silver hair and a scar across his cheek. He looked up and met her eyes through the glass, and in that single moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. Jack walked into the hospital with a calm, commanding presence. The staff didn't try to stop him. There was something about the way he carried himself, like a man on a mission too important to question. He found Emily sitting quietly, her hands trembling, and for a long moment, he just looked at her. She reminded him so much of his daughter, innocent, broken, but still holding on. He knelt beside her, his voice low and steady, and told her she wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the police arrived, sirens flashing, uncertain what to make of the scene. 97 bikers wasn't something they could just disperse. But Jack didn't want a fight. He walked out to the officers and explained what was happening, that the girl's stepfather was dangerous, that the system had failed her, and that they were there to make sure she stayed safe until social services could step in. The police chief, an old friend of Jack's from another lifetime, looked at the fear in Emily's eyes and decided not to interfere. Sometimes, the law needed a little help from the heart. The stepfather tried to push through, shouting, demanding to see his daughter, but every time he took a step, one of the bikers silently stepped forward. 97 men, one purpose. When he finally realized he couldn't win, his rage boiled over. He lunged, but before he could take another step, Jack stepped between him and Emily, his scar catching the hospital light like a warning. "You've done enough damage," Jack said quietly. You won't touch her again. The man was arrested that night, not because of the bikers, but because Linda had taken photos of Emily's injuries and recorded the conversation when Emily whispered the truth. Evidence was finally in the open. Justice, long overdue, was on its way. The next morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, Emily stepped outside the hospital doors. The steel wolves were still there, engines off, standing silently. She walked up to Jack, tears glistening on her cheeks, and whispered, "Thank you." Jack just smiled softly, placed his leather jacket around her shoulders, and told her, "You don't have to thank us, kid. Just promise you'll live free." When social workers came to take her to a safe home, the bikers revved their engines all at once, a roaring salute that shook the air and made everyone watching burst into tears. Emily looked back one last time, her small hand waving as the engines thundered behind her, and in that sound, she heard something she'd never known before: family. Days turned into weeks, and news of what happened spread across the country. The story of 97 bikers standing up for one frightened little girl touched millions of hearts. People began to see them differently, not as outlaws, but as protectors, men who carried loyalty, brotherhood, and compassion deeper than most would ever understand. Months later, Emily wrote a letter to the Steel Wolves. She said she was doing better, that she was finally safe, and that she wanted to visit one day. Jack kept that letter pinned to the wall of the club's meeting hall, framed under glass, a reminder of why they rode, not just for freedom, but for something greater. For kindness. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage and compassion can still change lives, then please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world what humanity truly means. Speech balloon special request. In the comments, write, "Kindness still rides," to honor the Steel Wolves and every hero who stands up for the innocent.